Everybody should read this book. I think everybody can read this book. Hi, so this is I'm going to talk about another book, Interior Chinatown. The author is Charles Wu. It was published in bago lang, 2020. So it's very new, fresh pa. I have to say something about the author very quickly. Charles Wu is actually one of the writers, if I'm not mistaken, of the hit sci-fi movie Westworld in HBO. TV series, one of the TV series that I really enjoy. So it was no surprise that I enjoyed his book. It's about, Interior Chinatown, with its really nice and flashy cover, like a fun, silly cover, is actually a very deep book. It has so many layers. It is at the superficial level, it's about a guy named Willis Wu, who is an actor or trying to be an actor. He's an Asian guy in Hollywood trying to make it big in Hollywood, like so many other Asian guys in Hollywood. So his father and his mother were actors also at their, during their time. So it's about him trying to get out of it, trying to make it big, trying to break the Asian stereotype in Hollywood, which is the generic Asian guy, and that's literally what's written in the book. That's one of the funny things about the book kasi meron siyang mga tags na these are the levels of how I could get to my dream in Hollywood. And funnily enough, the highest in his ladder in Hollywood is called the Kung Fu guy. Parang yun na yung pinaka-best. And that tells a lot. And why does he strive? Why does Willis Wu strive to be the Kung Fu guy? Because that's what Hollywood says. That's what Hollywood says and not saying it, right? That's the highest that you could be in Hollywood because you're Asian. And you will start off as a generic Asian guy, and then eventually you'll climb the Hollywood ladder, but you'll only just get there because you're Asian. So that is the book. But it tells it in such a subtle and sideways manner that it's not obvious. So, galing lang the way it was written. It's fiction. It's a fiction book. And they are going to turn this into a movie soon. I think it wouldn't be an unfair comment, or it wouldn't be too far off to say that some of the scenes in the book would have been taken from real life experiences, right? So Willis Wu, the main character, the lead character of the book, lives in Chinatown in Hollywood, and he works in this TV series called Black and White, wherein the black dude is the detective with the white detective girl, and him is just the extra generic Asian guy at the back. Parang ganyan. So everything about the scenes and the story progression of the book is about stereotypes and discrimination in Hollywood. Plot-wise, it's strange. It's weird. The way it's written is weird. And that caught me off guard. Kasi of course, you're used to novels wherein there's a clear narrative, diba? You know where it's going. This is strange. It's almost like it will come to a point wherein you begin to wonder if Willis is now talking about his real life, or is he now talking about his Hollywood life, his stage life? Kasi at some point, the two will bleed together. The two will merge, and you don't get to see the difference anymore. And I thought that was the point of the book. Like, his life is all about stereotyping. His life is mimicking his real life is mimicking his Hollywood self, and vice versa. That's why ganun din yung book. So when you read it, at some point medyo nakakalito. It's a bit confusing, but again, for me, that is the brilliance of the book. I wouldn't be surprised if some of it were his own experiences, and maybe even some from his friends or from his parents, ganun. Kasi, I mean, we don't know, not being there in Hollywood, but he is an Asian American. He's lived all his life there, I think. So yeah, I would think so. There's always, and that's another thing, right? With fiction books, there is always a grain of truth in fiction books. And for whoever who says that fiction books or fiction is not real life, they don't know what they're talking about. I would like to say that everybody can read this book. Okay, sige. Everybody can read this book because it's a technically easy read. It's fun, it's funny, it's silly, But if you don't get past that layer, you'll miss out on the real message. Now, as to who should read this book, I think us Asians in general, only for reasons of trying to understand what it's like to live outside of your home country and trying to fit in another nation's culture, in another nation's atmosphere and climate. So that's a good insight in itself. But this one is more specific kasi Hollywood siya, very specific to a Hollywood setting in the US. I think non-Asians should also read this book. Okay, so I take back what I said earlier that I think Asians should read this book. So I guess bottom line is that everybody can read this book. But I guess my point is your take on the book would be different from whatever perspective you're reading it from. Okay? So an Asian person reading this would have a different experience from a non-Asian person reading this. And that's a given. That's not being discriminatory. That's just fact. And I think it's a good insight for non-Asians to read it as well. Just to get that inside look, maybe, of the struggles of being an Asian in the US. But I can imagine some people feeling offended by it, especially at the portion wherein he started writing or talking about the black and white TV series featuring the black guy and the white girl, and then him, the Asian guy at the back. So that's a stereotype right there, right? And it can be offensive, but unfortunately, that's the reality of life that happens now. And I think it's these types of literature that gives us the opportunity to understand these really serious and deep topics at a friendlier tone, right? It's easier to digest to read it in a fiction setting, to read it in an almost funny setting, but not missing out on the real message. So I absolutely think that that's one of the goals, or that's one of the intention of the author why he wrote this at the time. It was published in 2020, so he probably wrote this, 2018, 2019? You could think of what was the economic climate, political climate in the US at the time. So I think that was one of his intentions as well. If you would have seen some of his interviews, he's a very subdued, serious guy. He is so opposite. He's such an opposite of Willis Wu, the guy here, his lead character. So that kind of gives you a sense of what, the seriousness of what he wants to say. Everybody should read this book. I think everybody can read this book, and I think they're not going to regret it. It is one of the, I think it's one of the best, I don't know ano bang nag-award nito, pero it's one of the critically acclaimed books in 2020, and a lot of good reviews about it also. So the book is called Interior Chinatown. Author is Charles Yu. It was published in 2020. It is soon to be a movie, if I'm not mistaken, or a TV series. So yeah, I enjoyed it.